Imagine this. You walk into a coffee shop in New York. You walk up to the counter. You smile confidently and say, "Hello. I would like to purchase one medium-sized coffee with milk, please." Your grammar is perfect. Every word is correct. Your pronunciation is clear. The barista understands you immediately. But something still feels different. Now listen to another customer. "Hey. Can I get a medium coffee with milk?" Short. Relaxed. Natural. Both people asked for exactly the same thing. Both were understood. But one sounded like they learned English from a textbook. The other sounded like someone who lives in English every day. Have you ever wondered why? Why do some English learners know thousands of words, yet still sound unnatural? The answer isn't vocabulary. It isn't grammar. It isn't even pronunciation. It's something much deeper. It's the way ideas are expressed. Today, I'm going to show you how native English speakers actually communicate. Not the English you'll find in most textbooks. Not the English people memorize for exams. Real English. The kind of English you hear in cafes, movies, podcasts, offices, and everyday conversations. Because sounding natural doesn't mean copying someone's accent. It means choosing words and expressions the way native speakers naturally do. Let me tell you about Kevin. Kevin moved from Germany to the United States. His English was excellent. He had studied for years. One day, he walked into an office kitchen and said, "Good morning, everyone. How are all of you feeling today?" Everyone smiled politely. Then another co-worker walked in. He simply said, "Morning, guys." Immediately, the room became lively. People answered, "Morning. Hey. How's it going?" Kevin later asked his colleague, "Did I say something wrong?" His colleague smiled. "No. Everything you said was correct. It just sounded formal." That was the moment Kevin realized something. Correct English and natural English are not always the same thing. Think about your own language. Do you always use the most formal sentence possible? Probably not. If your friend asks, "Are you hungry?" you don't usually answer, "Indeed. I am experiencing a considerable amount of hunger." You simply say, "Yeah, I'm starving." English works exactly the same way. Native speakers choose the easiest, most natural way to express an idea. Not the most complicated one. Now here's something interesting. Many English learners think sounding natural means speaking faster. It doesn't. In fact, many native speakers speak quite slowly. What makes them sound natural isn't speed. It's rhythm, word choice, and confidence. Imagine someone asks, "Would you like to watch a movie tonight?" A textbook answer might be, "Yes. I would be delighted to accompany you." Perfect grammar. But in everyday life, most native speakers simply say, "Yeah, sounds good." Or, "Sure, I'd love to." Or even, "Absolutely." Short, friendly, natural. Notice something? Native speakers often prefer simple English, not difficult English. Many learners believe advanced English means using advanced vocabulary. Actually, advanced speakers often choose simpler words. Because communication becomes easier. Imagine explaining something to a friend. Would you say, "I commenced my occupational responsibilities at approximately 8 o'clock. Or, "I started work around 8. Which sounds more natural? Exactly. Simple doesn't mean beginner. Simple means fluent. Now let's play a little game. I'll give you a textbook sentence. Then we'll transform it into natural English. Ready? Textbook. "I do not understand." Natural. "I don't get it." Textbook. "I am very tired." Natural. "I'm exhausted." Or, "I'm worn out." Textbook. "I am going to leave now." Natural. "I'm gonna head out." Or, "I should get going." Can you hear the difference? The meaning stays the same. The feeling changes completely. That's because native speakers think in phrases, not individual words. Instead of memorizing one word at a time, they memorize complete expressions. That's exactly what we're going to practice today. Now imagine your friend tells you some exciting news. Maybe they got a promotion. Maybe they passed an important exam. Maybe they're getting married. A textbook response might be, I am very happy for you. Perfectly correct. But many native speakers naturally say, no way. That's awesome. Or, that's amazing. Congratulations. Or simply, good for you. Small changes. Huge difference. Now here's your first challenge. Stop asking yourself, is this sentence grammatically correct? Instead ask, would a native speaker actually say it this way? That one question can completely change your English. Because from today, you're not just learning English. You're learning how English is really spoken. Now, I want you to think about the last movie you watched in English. Did the characters speak like your English textbook? Probably not. They interrupted each other. They laughed in the middle of sentences. They used short expressions. Sometimes, they didn't even finish their thoughts. Imagine two friends meeting after a long time. A textbook conversation might sound like this. Hello. How have you been recently? I have been doing very well. Thank you for asking. Perfect. But now listen to how it often sounds in real life. Hey. Long time no see. I know. How've you been? Pretty good. You. Can't complain. Short. Fast. Relaxed. Natural. The conversation feels alive. That's because native speakers don't try to sound impressive. They try to sound comfortable. Comfort creates fluency. Now let me tell you about Lisa. Lisa had excellent English. She knew grammar. She knew thousands of words. But every time she spoke, people asked, where did you learn English? At first, she thought it was because of her accent. Later, she realized something surprising. It wasn't her pronunciation. It was her word choice. She used phrases that sounded like they came directly from a textbook. One day, instead of saying, I am very busy today, she simply said, I've got a lot going on today. Immediately, the conversation felt more natural. Then instead of saying, I am very hungry, she said, I'm starving. Instead of, I am extremely excited, she said, I can't wait. Little by little, people stopped noticing that she was an English learner. Not because she became perfect, but because her English became more natural. Now let's practice together. I'm going to give you some formal sentences. Your job is to imagine how a native speaker might say them. Formal. I will contact you tomorrow. Natural. I'll give you a call tomorrow. Or, I'll text you tomorrow. Another one. Formal. I appreciate your assistance. Natural. Thanks. I really appreciate it. Or simply, thanks a lot. Here's another. Formal. I have no idea. Wait, that's already natural. And that's another important lesson. Not everything has to sound complicated. Sometimes the simplest phrase is exactly what native speakers use. Now let's talk about contractions. Many learners pronounce every single word clearly. For example, I am. Native speakers often say, I'm. They are. They're. We have. We've. He will. He'll. These aren't shortcuts. They're normal English. Many learners pronounce every single word clearly. For example, I am. Native speakers often say, I'm. They are. They're. We have. We've. He will. He'll. These aren't shortcuts. They're normal English. Imagine speaking without contractions. I do not know. Instead of, I don't know. Technically, both are correct. But one sounds much more natural in everyday conversation. Now here's something else native speakers do. They soften their language. Imagine your friend asks, can you help me move this weekend? Instead of saying, no. Many native speakers say, I wish I could, but I've already got plans. Or, I'm afraid I can't. They're still saying no, but they're making it sound warmer. That's part of sounding natural. It's not only about words. It's about relationships. Now let's imagine someone tells you a funny story. A textbook response might be, that is very amusing. Would anyone actually say that in a casual conversation? Probably not. Most people would say, that's hilarious. Or, no way. Or, you're kidding. Or simply, seriously. Natural English is full of emotion. That's why native speakers often use expressions instead of complete sentences. Imagine someone says, "I just won free concert tickets." You might hear responses like, "No way. That's awesome. You're so lucky. That's incredible." Notice something? Most of these aren't full grammatical sentences, but they're perfect conversational English. That's because conversations aren't essays. They're emotional. Now let's talk about one of the biggest differences between fluent speakers and learners. Fluent speakers use chunks. Learners often build sentences word by word. Imagine you memorize the word depends. Good. Now imagine you memorize the entire expression. It depends. Even better. Now imagine. It depends on. That's a conversation chunk. Your brain doesn't need to build it anymore. It's already ready. The more chunks you learn, the more natural your English becomes. Here are a few you'll hear every day. That makes sense. Sounds good. I don't think so. I guess so. To be honest. At the end of the day. No worries. Take your time. I'll let you know. How's it going? These aren't difficult. But they're everywhere. Learning these expressions will make your English sound much more natural than learning rare vocabulary words. Now let's imagine you're leaving a friend's house. A textbook goodbye might be, "Thank you for inviting me. I had a wonderful time." Perfectly correct. But many native speakers simply say, "Thanks for having me." Or, "I had a great time." Or, "See you around." Simple. Friendly. Natural. Now here's another habit to build. Pay attention to how native speakers react. Not just what they say. Notice how often they say, "Really? Exactly. Right. Absolutely. Totally." These tiny reactions make conversations feel alive. If you stay completely silent while someone is talking, the conversation feels uncomfortable. But small reactions show you're listening. They're part of natural communication. And the best part is, they're incredibly easy to learn. Now, I want you to imagine you're having lunch with a group of American friends. They're laughing, sharing stories, interrupting each other. Not in a rude way, but in a natural way. One person says, "I finally finished that project." Another immediately replies, "No way. That took forever." Someone else laughs and says, "I thought you'd never finish." Notice something? Nobody waited for the perfect moment. Nobody delivered long, perfectly structured speeches. Real conversations move like a game of tennis. Back and forth. Quick. Natural. Full of energy. That's why sounding natural isn't only about what you say. It's also about how you respond. Now let's talk about one of the biggest differences between textbooks and real life. Textbooks teach complete sentences. Real life often doesn't. Imagine your friend asks, "Want some coffee?" Do you always answer, "No, thank you. I do not desire any coffee at this moment"? Of course not. You simply say, "I'm good." Or, "No thanks." Or, "I'm okay." Just 2 words. Yet they're perfectly natural. Now imagine someone says, "I think it's going to rain." You could answer, "Yeah, looks like it." Or, "I think so too." Or simply, "Probably." Real English is full of short responses. That's why listening to native speakers is so important. You'll notice they rarely use long, complicated sentences unless they're giving a speech or explaining something. Now let me tell you about another student. His name was David. David believed that using difficult vocabulary would make him sound more fluent. So instead of saying, "I'm happy," he searched for words like ecstatic, delighted, overjoyed. Every sentence sounded like a dictionary. One day his American friend laughed and said, "You know, you sound like you're giving a formal presentation all the time." David smiled. Then he started paying attention to everyday conversations. He noticed something surprising. Native speakers rarely tried to sound impressive. They tried to sound comfortable. From that day on, he stopped asking, "What's the most advanced word?" Instead he asked, "What's the most natural word?" That one change transformed his English. Now here's another secret. Native speakers repeat themselves. Yes, they do. Learners often believe repetition sounds bad. But in conversation, it's completely normal. Imagine someone asks, "Did you enjoy the concert?" A natural answer might be, "Yeah, it was really good. Really, really good." Or, "It was so much fun. Honestly, so much fun." That repetition adds emotion. It doesn't make the English worse. It makes it sound human. Now let's practice replacing textbook English with conversational English. Instead of saying, "I am uncertain," say, "I'm not sure." Instead of, "I apologize," say, "Sorry." Instead of, "I understand," say, "Got it." Instead of, "I will consider it," say, "I'll think about it." Instead of, "I am extremely occupied today," say, "I'm swamped today." Or, "I'm really busy." Do you notice a pattern? The natural versions are usually shorter, simpler, and easier to remember. Now let's talk about something that changes your English more than almost anything else. Intonation. Imagine saying, "Really?" One word. But listen to how many meanings it can have. Really? Surprise. Really? Agreement. Really? Disbelief. Really? Excitement. Same word. Different music. English isn't only spoken. It's performed. That's why copying the rhythm of native speakers is just as important as copying their words. Here's a challenge. The next time you watch an English movie, don't just listen to the vocabulary. Listen to the emotion. Notice where the speaker pauses. Notice which words become louder. Notice how their voice rises when they're excited, or falls when they're serious. You're not just learning English. You're learning how English feels. Now let's imagine you're telling your friend about your weekend. Instead of saying, "I visited my grandmother. Then I returned home." Try something more natural. "I went to see my grandma, and then I headed back home." Or, "I spent the afternoon at my grandma's place, then just relaxed at home." Same story. More conversational. Now here's something that surprises many learners. Native speakers don't always use perfect grammar in casual conversations. You might hear, "Me too," instead of, "So do I," or, "Ain't," in certain regions, or, "Gonna," "Wanna," "Kinda." These aren't mistakes. They're part of informal spoken English. Do you need to use all of them? No. But you should recognize them. Because understanding natural English is just as important as speaking it. Now I want to leave you with one powerful habit. Every day, choose one native English speaker you enjoy listening to. Maybe it's a YouTuber, a podcast host, an actor, a news presenter. Listen to just 2 or 3 minutes. Then pause. Repeat exactly what they say. Not only the words, the rhythm, the pauses, the emotion, the energy. Do this every day for 30 days. You won't just improve your pronunciation. You'll begin to absorb natural English automatically. One day, someone will say, "You sound really natural when you speak English." And you'll smile. Because you'll remember that it wasn't one magical trick. It was hundreds of small habits. Listening, repeating, observing, practicing, little by little, day by day. That's how natural English is built. Not by memorizing the biggest words. Not by trying to impress people. But by communicating the way real people communicate every single day. So from today, don't chase perfect English. Don't chase difficult English. Chase natural English. Because when your English sounds natural, people stop paying attention to your language, and start paying attention to you. And that's the real goal. To express your ideas. Share your stories. Make people laugh. Build friendships. Create opportunities. And enjoy conversations, without thinking about every single word. I'll see you in the next lesson. Until then, keep listening to real English, keep copying natural expressions, keep speaking every day, and remember, fluent English isn't about sounding like a dictionary. It's about sounding like yourself, in English.